Last time on Chewonit, stress may only be bad for you, right? If you believe that to be the case. In other words, stress will not harm your body if you view that stress as something positive. Hey, what's up? My name is Xuan.
Hi, my name's Angie.
And welcome back to the Chewonit podcast, a podcast where we delve into the mental health issues faced by the youth and young adults today.
This is a production of Brahm Centre, a charity here in Singapore promoting happier and healthier living.
Angie, I want to talk to you about this topic today because I feel like it's a hot topic that many youths are they have a vested interest in, but they don't get a chance to talk about it, to parents, to people who have more experience in life than them, right? Because in the Asian culture, it's quite taboo, right?
Well, I think that parents just find it very challenging to talk about it because their parents didn't really talk to them about it as well. So this kind of cycle goes on. Yes, I agree. It's a really important topic as sex is part and parcel of life.
Okay, and what do we youths really need to know about this topic, about sex?
If I can take this from my experience, I realize that with the two kids I have, and they will be growing up and they will be very naturally curious about sex, I need to prepare them for the eventuality.
I mean, if we as youths, we don't have parents to turn to, right? Naturally, we will go to, the internet, right? Where there's tons of information, right? To learn more about things like sex. And, along the way, some of us may encounter or we may, stumble upon things like pornography.
Too many people are actually learning about sex through porn. And that is probably not the healthiest way to discover what sex is.
Okay, shall we define sex first, right? Before we start things off. Okay, according to Cambridge Dictionary, right? The definition of sex is the physical activity between people involving the sexual organs.
Yeah.
But how much, what do you think, right? As, someone in your 50s, what should we know about, the different, what should we know about this topic of sex, really?
When my kids were young, actually while they were still in primary school.
Yeah.
And when kids are in primary school, they're also more willing to listen to parents than when the kids grow up to be teenagers.
Of course, yeah.
So I started talking to them about sex because in school they were learning a bit about biology, but they never talked about how the sperm got to the egg. And the dangers of intimacy as well as the pleasures of intimacy. So children are definitely curious. I did remember my domestic worker alerting me that maybe the kids were watching a little bit of porn, and I was not surprised because I'm sure for all of us parents, if we are really going to be honest about it, our kids probably have peeked at it. So it's really important that we talk about it.
Did you have sex education back then when you were in school?
I was really fortunate. I had an incredible father who bought me a book that was called All About Women. Oh. And this really helped me to understand why I was menstruating and what this means in terms of my body readiness to be conceiving a baby.
Yeah.
And also what is sex. And although he didn't really talk to me about it, I remember his buying me this book was really helpful in educating me. And I remember I saw his Playboy magazines and I peeked at it and it was like, whoa. And so even at my age, those days, I was naturally curious and I looked at the Playboy magazine and I looked at the Penthouse and but that's not really the good source of learning about sex.
Yeah. And, to be honest, right? If I were to recall sex education back then when I was in school, I think it started in late primary school and then in secondary school, there was, 1 or 2 lessons and it was like they gathered everybody, right, in the school hall and they just briefly touched on it. And they just showed us like the very, disgusting parts about, STIs and all that, just to scare us off, right? When we were teenagers. In short, simply put, they were trying to, make us refrain from sex.
I realized that trying to teach the kids to just refrain from sex was probably not sufficient. So I talk to the kids about the consequences of having sex.
Because the more you try to, it's like the forbidden fruit effect, right? The more you try to steer them away, the more they want to, the more they want to explore about this thing.
Definitely. And also watching Hollywood movies, it seems like so normal, right? If two people get together and then the next day they wake up together in bed. So you can't just now tell the kids, abstinence is the way to go, because we're not equipping them the resources and also decision points and consequences so that they would actually make a better choice in that moment in time.
You know what's the problem with all those Hollywood movies? They make it so glamorous. They make it so pleasant. They make it seem like, you can have one night of fun and then there won't be any consequences involved. No babies after that. No, no unwanted consequences lah, basically. And that's a problem.
Well, some of the TV dramas do offer a very or more realistic view of what happens if somebody ends up not having unexpected pregnancy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I've been watching ER. I know this ER show. It's a very old show, but there was a doctor who ended up impregnating a lady and ending up having to be a parent, not by choice, but by accident, and how it complicated his life.
And it can be very detrimental, right, to the child's upbringing, especially if you didn't expect a baby to come along. I mean, you might not be in that phase of your life where when you're prepared to, handle this responsibility.
It certainly is not the most ideal environment for a baby to grow up, realizing that actually his or her parents didn't really want to be together.
Yeah.
So how I addressed it was I actually educated both my kids on what is considered statutory rape. So anyone who has sex below 14 would be considered statutory rape, whether it's by consent or otherwise. So the guy who has a sexual relationship with the girl who is below 14 would end up being charged for statutory rape, and the guy could end up having to serve in prison for up to 20 years. And that's a huge price to pay for a few moments of pleasure.
At 14 years old.
So I made sure my son was aware of that, because if he should ever get involved with a young girl below 14, it could cost his life, literally, right? I mean, spending years in jail as a young person, that's it. Your life, a large part of your life is taken away.
But why is it so? Why does the law punish the guy and not the girl if the girl was the one who initiated it?
Because at the age of below 14, the girl is considered unable to actually provide consent. This is to protect girls from being taken advantage of.
Right.
Yeah. But if you're above 14, but still below 16, it is still considered illegal. And the imprisonment can be up to 10 years.
Right.
So it's really not a good idea to consider having sex until at least you turn 16 and above.
Yeah. The problems today, right? I feel most youths today, we're past that generation of the conventional sex, right? The vaginal sex, the oral sex, the anal sex, and all that. Right now, there's this new thing, and it's called cyber sex. Have you heard of it?
I would consider cyber sex a form of masturbation, except now you engage someone else to be involved with you over the web.
Yeah. And
the danger of that is that you don't know if someone is recording it. If you're in the view of the camera. So it's still a risk. I would caution anyone exposing themselves over the web to anyone else who could be recording you, as this could end up being an opportunity for someone to blackmail.
Yeah. And apart from blackmail, I think another quite serious issue is the issue of addiction. Because the fact that, you can, it's so readily available. It's on your phone, So anywhere, anytime.
Okay, while masturbation is not abnormal, what is abnormal is that you can't function if you don't masturbate. That is why it is then classified as an addiction. So I have a friend who was threatened to be blackmailed, being asked to send money in order for a video not to be released.
Oh my gosh.
And this absolutely terrified him.
Yeah.
So what I assured him was the person actually doesn't have a real intention in releasing it. Because once he releases it, it is no longer usable as a blackmail tool. So fortunately, my prediction in this case was true, and it never really materialized in my friend having to send any money over to this blackmailer.
Yeah.
So just be very careful, you guys out there. Just make sure that any of your sexual activity is not being recorded by anyone, including yourself.
You know, a lot of people at our age, including me, we're very impressionable, right? We see something online, we watch movies, we watch TV shows, and we're hooked onto it. And then we want to be like the people we see on TV, right? And a lot of their actions, a lot of their behaviors that, we see in movies and TV shows, we learn from them, right? They're like our role models, right? People like, celebrities, actors, or these A-list actors. And how much of that do you think is worth, learning from?
This is where we have to be discerning, because what we see on TV, social media, could be a masked version of the person. Look at how many celebrities' relationships end up in a divorce. So you can be very good looking and glam, but at the end of the day, when you live together, it takes more than good looks. It takes a good heart, a good mind, kindness, generosity, sense of genuine care instead of self-centeredness for a relationship to work.
Angie, are you a James Bond fan?
I have only seen James Bond movies when Roger Moore was James Bond. I didn't really fancy the other James Bonds, so I didn't really watch them. Okay,
awesome. Let's talk about Roger Moore compared to the modern day James Bond. Because, the older James Bond actors like Sean Connery, Roger Moore, the way they treat women, when we watch the movies, as compared to the modern day James Bond people like Daniel Craig, it's different, right? Because of, with the recent Me Too movement and all these movements about, how we should treat women and not objectify them. Shall we talk about this topic of sexual assault?
Times have changed. I was so young when I watched Roger Moore, so I really don't even remember what he did. But certainly, I think women these days are more aware of their rights, and they are more willing to speak up if a man is perceived to be harassing her. And when I was working, I remember hearing about bosses dating juniors. Although I've never dated a boss, but I did find that to be repulsive, because I don't think many of these women actually have the ability to say no if their big bosses invite them out for a drink or a meal, if these female employees are hoping to be able to do well in their careers.
If not, they could be blacklisted, right?
Yeah, or they don't have the same opportunities as others.
When is it considered rape? Okay, you talked about, the statutory age and all that, but if let's say, okay, I'm just thinking about that James Bond movie again. If the girl consents but regrets the day after, is it considered rape? Is it considered assault?
If a female consents but later on regrets, that is usually not considered rape. But at any point in the intimacy, if the girl changes her mind and says no, and he can't stop himself, that could potentially be considered rape. So pretty high risk, guys out there. I suggest that you really want to make sure that the girl is in very clear-minded state when she agrees that she's going to have a sexual relationship with you.
Yeah, because if there's alcohol involved.
If there's alcohol involved, and the female is deemed not to be in her full mental capacity, then even her yes could be considered not made in a good mental state.
Yeah, and that's a problem.
that's a risk. That's why I always believe that you guys are treading on very thin ice when you are having casual sex or practicing casual sex with women out there.
Yeah. And how can we stay on the safe side though, right, from all this?
The best thing is when you do have a serious relationship with plans on a future together, then you consider having a sexual relationship. Are you guys aware that if you are alone with a woman and she accuses you of having molested her, you are at risk of having to defend your reputation and integrity? So I would really caution you not to be in a closed area where you could be putting yourself at risk. So keep your hands to yourself and keep your zippers up, guys. That's the best practice to observe. And for the females out there, I would urge you not to get involved in casual sex if you can help it, because your reputation could be at stake and you could be on the list of someone as being conquered. And one day when you do meet somebody decent who would like to end up being your partner, may actually change his mind because he has discovered that you have been sleeping around. So maybe you might want to consider this before you decide that, casual sex is fun.
Okay, before we go, we like to do this at the end of every show. We wrap up our episode by poking fun at our episode topic.
For today's episode, I'm going to be the one asking the riddle, and let's see if you can get the answer.
Okay.
What does a cow have 4 of that a woman only has 2 of?
I can think of something, but I think it's a bit rude to say.
Oh, you have a dirty mind, thing, Xuan. The answer is legs.
Oh. Hope you enjoyed today's episode. Of course, Chewonit is a production by Brahm Centre Singapore. Don't forget to follow them on their socials at Brahm Centre Singapore on Facebook and at Brahm Centre SG on Instagram. Now, next week, we talk about depression and suicide. How you know you're on the road to depression, toxic positivity, and why so many of us fall into depression from working hard. Join us next week.